Hello, welcome, happy new year. 2023 is coming to an end and 2024 is right around the corner. And I don't know about you, but I really love this time of year. I love the holiday season and I love New Year's. I just really love the idea of getting a fresh start, starting with a clean slate, turning over a new page, starting a new chapter, if you will. And along with that, every year I, like so many others, make resolutions and goals for the coming year. A bunch of them are bookish in nature. I make a lot of bookish resolutions and reading goals that help me guide my reading throughout the year. I'm usually pretty good at sticking to them because I give myself pretty relaxed resolutions. I'm never too strict because my reading mood fluctuates heavily and unpredictably throughout the year. So it's very hard for me to set very specific and very strict goals. I make them pretty relaxed, not necessarily easy, but definitely achievable, and it works for me. So now that I have this bookish channel, why not make a video and share with you guys my bookish resolutions and reading goals for 2024. We'll see how I do throughout the year. Achieving these goals is very satisfying. I love looking back at my reading year and knowing that I've achieved what I set out to achieve. I have a set of 6 resolutions and goals for 2024 when it comes to my reading, and I figure we just get straight into them. My first reading resolution and goal of 2024 is to read more Scandinavian literature, and I mean specifically reading Scandinavian literature in their original languages. I am Norwegian and Swedish, and I have read very little Norwegian and Swedish. I read mostly English. I think most of the Norwegian that I've read, I've done at school, and I've read no Swedish. I really want to. I know that we have a lot of great authors here, and I know that a lot of their stuff does get translated in general. I don't really like reading translations if I can help it. Like, I'll always read an originally English novel in English, and I feel the same way about Norwegian. It doesn't feel right reading a Norwegian book in English. It feels really wonky. I've tried and it feels wonky. It doesn't feel right. So I want to read more Scandinavian literature, probably mostly Norwegian and Swedish, in 2024. In order to help me with this challenge, I've decided to make a series on this channel where I dedicate a video every once in a while specifically to a Scandinavian author or a set of Scandinavian books. I'll choose Scandinavian literature that I know has English translations. A lot of it does, I'm sure, but I want to start with the biggest because I haven't gone around to any of them. I haven't read Fredrik Backman, for example, who I know is wildly popular globally. They're originally Swedish, and I'm really looking forward to trying them out in Swedish. Jo Nesbø is a very well-known name to crime lovers around the world. He's been translated into a lot of languages. He's probably, at least in our contemporary time, the biggest Norwegian author that we've had. They even made a movie of one of his books, The Snowman. I don't know if you know it. My parents are big Jo Nesbø fans. They've read all of his books, and they both agree that the movie is terrible. So don't watch the movie, and if you have, the book is better. I have it on very good authority. The point is, I want to read more Scandinavian literature, and I want to kind of motivate myself by sharing that journey with you guys. And I mentioned in a post I made the other day in the community tab on this channel, the first one that I want to do is Jo Nesbø, and it'll come in the end of January or beginning of February. That's the plan. I'll be reading a couple of his most famous Harry Hole books, which is a series he writes of a detective named, in English, you'll call him Harry Hole. The detective is Harry Hole, and there's a series of like 14 books or something, and it's just never ending, and he keeps writing more and people love them. So I'll be trying a few of those books. I'll also be reading this book, which I got a few months ago. The only reason I picked it up is because it was Jo Nesbø, and it was something that I didn't realize he wrote, which is short stories. And these are a set of, 6 or 7 short stories centered around jealousy. This does have a translation. Is it called Jealousy Man? Something like that. But I'm very excited because the only thing I know about Jo Nesbø's books is the Harry Hole ones. I haven't read any of them, but I mean, everyone knows of them. At least in Norway, everyone knows of these books. And they are what you associate with Jo Nesbø. But what I had no idea about was that he wrote other stuff too. So I'll be reading this one. I'll be reading a couple of the Harry Hole books, and I might read one of his standalones as well. We'll see what time allows for. but that's the plan. That's the first video I'm going to be making in the Scandinavian literature series I'll be starting this year. So that's kind of like 2 goals or resolutions in one. Reading more Scandinavian literature and also starting and keeping up with that Scandinavian literature series here on YouTube. Needless to say, I'm very, very excited. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm sure there's tons of great books written by Scandinavian authors that I just have never given a chance, and it's about damn time. So that's my first reading resolution and goal of 2024. My second bookish resolution and reading goal for 2024 is to read more off of my physical TBR. If you've watched either of my bookshelf videos, I have 2 of them up at this point. One of them is just a bookshelf tour and book collection video from October, and the other one is me redoing my shelves earlier this month. If you saw either of those, maybe especially the latest one, you'll know that I have an enormous physical TBR pile. It just goes to show it's true. Reading is one hobby and book collecting is a whole other one. That being said, I feel the need to defend myself just a little bit. Listen, I've been in so many slumps this year. It's wild. I've been in slump after slump after slump. I get out of the slump, read 2 books, fall into a new one. It's been awful. It's not been a great reading year for me. But the fact that I end up in a reading slump does not stop my other hobby of book buying. A lot of these books have been on my shelf for a while already. I get books for my birthday. I get books for Christmas. Whenever there are really good deals for books that I have been anticipating, I take advantage of them, and so I accumulate quite a few books, all of them books that I really, really look forward to reading, of course, but I accumulate them, and then I end up in slumps that just don't allow me to read them, and they've just been piling up because if I can't read to catch up with my accumulation, this is what happens, right? The slumps take out the reading hobby, but they make absolutely no change to my book buying hobby. And so they're not very level, right? They're not level. So a lot of these books have been on my shelf for a lot of years. I don't actually accumulate a lot of books every year. I don't. I mean, it's all relative, but I personally don't think I accumulate too many books every year. It's just that I have, over the past few years, been through far too many and far too intense reading slumps that just have made me fall so far behind. A few years ago, I was very, very good at reading as much as I was buying, if not more, and I had complete control of my physical TBR, and I've just lost it over the past few years. And I think it's about time that I take back control. And I know it's unrealistic for me to make one of my reading bookish resolutions and reading goals a book buying ban. I know that that's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. I've never been able to adhere to a book buying ban ever. So I know that that's not realistic. The more realistic option is to make a sort of system. And the system that I am basically going to be adopting is that for every book I buy, I have to read 2 books that I own. For example, in January, if I read 2 books, I get to buy 1 book. If in January I read 5 books, I can buy 2. And if in January I read 1 book, then I can't buy any. And that doesn't mean I have to buy books every single month. I can collect those points and then go on a huge, book buying bonanza at some point in the summer if I want to. The idea is to try and trim down my physical TBR. I don't ban myself from buying books, but this way I can control it. And then whenever I do buy books, I know that I'm allowed to buy so and so many. I've tried it before and it's worked for me, and I'm just gonna employ it again. I feel like this is far more realistic because I don't actually go and buy books all the time. I don't buy books all that often. It just feels that way because when I accumulate books, I never accumulate them just one at a time. It's usually a few at a time. And the second rule that I want to put in place is that when I do buy a book, I try to read it as soon as possible. In other words, buy books that I'm so eager to read that I just don't end up putting them on a shelf and never reading them. I was also very good at this. Back when I was in control of my physical TBR, I was very good at this. I never let books sit and collect dust. Whenever I bought a new book, I was ready to read it. I was in such control back then, and I need to get back on that. So that's my second goal. And this second goal kind of goes hand in hand with my third bookish resolution and reading goal for 2024, which is to average reading about 2 books a month. This doesn't mean that I have to read only 2 books a month or a minimum of 2 books a month. It means that by the end of the year, I want to have read at least 24 books. I've had this goal and rule for myself for the past 2 years. I achieved this goal both times. It works because some months I read a lot and some months I read nothing. And if I were to be really strict with myself, I would say you have to read at least 2 books a month. But that just means in a month where I don't want to read anything, just force my way through books that I might otherwise enjoy and end up not really liking. This is the way that I kind of try to guide how much I read a year. I do want to read more than 24 books a year, but setting this as a minimum is so incredibly achievable. You'll see this in my the books I read this year video coming next week. I read just over 24 books in 2023. And again, I've been through slump after slump after slump this past year. It hasn't been a great reading year for me. Having that number, it feels good. And I like that goal because I can always exceed it, but it's a very good minimum. It's a minimum that works for me. It has evidently worked for years at this point. So it's a minimum number that works for me, that motivates me, that's very doable, even in years like this one where I've suffered through so many slumps. It's a good minimum to work with. And if I exceed it, that's amazing. And if I don't, I don't. My 4th bookish resolution and reading goal for 2024 is to pick up the habit of reading before bed. Again, this was a habit that I had years ago, and over the past few years, I have been part of the group of people that suffer from sitting on your phone until you go to sleep. And I want to kick that habit. And in order to kick it, I need to replace it with something else. And what better habit to pick up than reading before bed? I used to love doing this. The only danger is that it's happened plenty of times where I've just ended up reading past when I initially planned on putting a book down because, it's the typical one more chapter. And then something happens and you're like, well, I can't quit now. But you know what? If I lose sleep over a really good story, then that's worth it. So that's my 4th bookish resolution and reading goal. Pick up the habit of reading a little bit before bed instead of being on my phone last thing before I fall asleep. I think that'll be good for me in so many ways. My 5th bookish resolution and reading goal for 2024 is one that I have every single year and never seem to achieve, but I keep insisting on trying anyway. And that's catching up on the series that I've already started, specifically ones that I actually have sequels to on my physical TBR. So kind of related to my read more of my physical TBR resolution as well. I want to catch up on the series that I've started that I have the physical copies, the physical sequels to already. And once I've done that, I need to prioritize the series that I want to finish, which are probably going to be the ones that already have next books out. Maybe even the series is finished and I just haven't caught up. I also think that I want to try and stop starting series that I've only just begun. I don't want to get into more series that don't have sequels out yet, just because if I do end up really loving it and I have to wait a full year for a sequel, then by the time the sequel comes out, I'm just gonna have either forgotten a bunch of things and just not be as interested anymore, or the magic will have worn off, or I'll just have moved on to other things. I don't know. I've always had better luck finishing series that already are completed or that have a bunch of books out already, so that I can always I can keep going while I'm still in the mood for it. I'm going to prioritize a couple of fantasy series that I've started in particular. Just finish a bunch of books that exist in a world or belong to a series that I've already started and that I've been meaning to finish, rather than go out and start a new series that's only just been born. There's only one book out and the next book won't come out until next year, and it's just not something that works for me, and I have to realize that and accept it. So this is going to be one of the harder ones, I think, just because there are so many books on my TBR that I want to read, and it feels like a little bit of a deep sigh getting into the series that I've started and not finished. But yeah, that's that resolution and that reading goal. I make it every year and I never achieve it. For now, might as well include it, might as well try. No harm in trying, right? Can't hurt to just include it, and who knows, maybe I will achieve it this year. Maybe 2024 is the year. Fingers crossed. And my last a bookish resolution and reading goal for 2024 is to face some reading fears. I try to face a new reading fear every year. They keep popping up. New ones, I mean. New reading fears keep popping up. Maybe it's a specific book that I've been afraid of tackling. Last year was The Count of Monte Cristo. It wasn't really a fear, but it was a challenge because it's so big. It was the biggest book that I'd ever read at the time. Still the biggest book that I've ever read. So that was a challenge, and I met it. And it was the most satisfying feeling when I did. This year, I figure I try and face some of my biggest reading fears, namely classics. Specifically, I mean Jane Austen. I've said this before, the English they use takes me so long to read, and it's just no fun. It kind of sucks because I do really want to digest these stories in their original format, in the original book. Watching the adaptions is all well and good, but there is nothing quite like reading the original book, particularly for a classic like Jane Austen's many, many classics. I own a copy of Pride and Prejudice because a few years ago I was very ambitious and bought a very pretty edition that I saw on sale somewhere. I figure if I want to be considered any sort of cultured reader, I have to read Jane Austen. And I tried and didn't get further than like 3 pages in before I gave up. So that was a few years ago now, and I just think that I should be able to get through it. I might not end up loving it just because it might not be my thing, but I do want to read it. I do want to absorb what has become one of English literature's most well-known classical pieces, and I really want to. I just know that it's going to be a project. Probably this is the one that's going to be the most difficult one. Forget the last one I mentioned. This is the one that's going to be the most challenging. I'm so intimidated by Jane Austen, so intimidated by Pride and Prejudice, and I really want to end up loving it. And if I don't, then what do I do with myself? Once I read and have finished Pride and Prejudice, you will not be hearing the end of it. I will be so proud of myself, but also if I don't, I'm absolutely not going to be kicking myself because this is scary, this is intimidating, and I feel a little bit crazy for having put it on my list. But here we are. I'm being a daredevil, and we'll see in a year's time whether or not I achieved it. As I say, either way, I'm not going to kick myself, but it would be really cool if I did. So that's it. Those are my 6 bookish resolutions and reading goals for 2024. I'm so excited. I'm really looking forward to this upcoming reading year. I'm really looking forward to taking all of you guys with me on my reading journey for 2024. I have so many fun reading plans, so many great books to read this year. I have a really good feeling about my resolutions and goals. I think I'll be able to achieve them all. Time will tell, of course. I say this at the start of every year, but I'm going to keep saying it until it actually comes true. A girl can dream. So those were my bookish resolutions and reading goals for 2024. Let me know if any of you have any bookish resolutions or reading goals for the upcoming year and what they are. If you want to share them, then as always, we can have a chat down in the comments. I hope 2023 was a good year for you. I hope you're ready to close that particular chapter, and I hope you're looking forward to 2024. I hope it treats you well. I hope you found tons of new favorite books in the past year and that you'll find tons of new ones in this new year. I hope you have a wonderful New Year's celebration, and I'll see you all in 2024. Bye!